about the effects of the Great Depression. Impact of the Great Depression. Let's start with the economic effects that the Great Depression had. First one was a lost confidence in the economy. After the stock market crashed in 1929, most people became afraid to invest in stocks, and businesses were afraid to expand. People were afraid to spend their money. So it's pretty difficult to get the economy going again when no one can or will spend any money. Then we had banks closing. Now, many banks had invested heavily in stocks and had suffered major losses as a result of the crash. Banks had also encouraged their customers to invest in stocks, and when these customers took heavy losses in the stock market, they were unable to pay back loans to the banks. Some banks started to close, which made more people panic that they were going to lose their money. And so people would literally rush to their bank and try and withdraw all of their savings. However, banks don't keep enough cash on hand to cover all of the deposits, so therefore the banks would actually run out of money and more banks began to close. In 1933, 4,000 banks closed and more than 9,000 total closed in the 1930s. Millions of people lost their life savings. Another economic effect of the Great Depression was that businesses reduced their production or actually just closed. Now, when the banks closed, many businesses also lost their corporate savings and their operating accounts, and without enough money to operate, some companies would be forced to shut down. If you remember, companies had also overproduced in the 1920s, and now there was very little demand as people simply stopped purchasing new goods. From 1929 to 1933, the U.S. gross national product, which is a measurement of how many goods and services are produced in a year, dropped by 33%. And in 1930, over 26,000 businesses failed. And in 1931, another 28,285 went under. Other businesses simply scaled back their operations and slowed production in reaction to the decreased demand. Well, when businesses close, it's pretty likely that people are going to lose jobs. And so unemployment raised as well during the Great Depression. From 1929, it rose from 3% to 25% by 1933. And the people that were lucky enough to stay employed often had their hours or their wages reduced and had to live in fear that basically they would lose their job next. If there was an open position, hundreds of people would line up to apply, and people had to start to rely on charity. Soup kitchens, bread lines became the main source of food for some. Now you'll see here a couple of pictures of what I mean about how many people would show up to apply for just maybe even a single position. Personal income during the 1930s also went way down, reaching a low in 1933. And you can see some pictures here of a bread line, a long line of the unemployed and homeless men waiting to get a free dinner, etc. Well, this resulted in reduced purchasing power. As people lost their jobs or had their wages cut, they were unable or unwilling to spend money on anything but the bare essentials. All of these combined created a continuing cycle of depression. So, for instance, if you look here, banks close. As a result, people lose their savings and businesses close. As businesses close, people are laid off or fired. So when people lose savings and are laid off and fired, then they can't buy goods or food, which means there's no demand for goods, which means there's going to be less productivity. More businesses are going to be closed, etc. And it becomes a vicious cycle.